Many of us grew up learning about the sinking of the RMS Titanic. We learned about the very innovative safety features the Titanic had for the time period. We also learned about how during the sinking, the crew worked tirelessly to evacuate as many people from the doomed ship as possible. We learned about the engineers and the firemen who stayed below decks, fighting the flooding and working to keep the ship's power going until literally the very last second. I mean, just incredible stuff. Now, it is true that thanks to the actions of all of these people, they did succeed in saving hundreds of lives from the doomed ship. However, what if I was to tell you that due to the actions of one person, and while this decision seemed very inconsequential at the time, it would in fact accelerate the sinking of the Titanic by roughly 15 to 30 minutes. Are you confused about what I'm talking about? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing in today's video. I hope you enjoy. Special thanks to Titanic Honor and Glory for providing the sinking animations you're going to see in today's video. Please check out their work in the description below. So this story is kind of a unique one from Titanic. And the reason it's unique is because this is one of those stories where there are no direct survivors who could give testimony on the chain of events that occurred. The only way we know that something did happen is based on, number one, evidence at the wreck, number two, the testimony of the person who initiated everything, and three, we have some circumstantial evidence that can kind of back up some of the physical evidence we see at the wreck. So it is clear that something happened. But yeah, there is going to be a little bit of guesswork with this story to try to piece everything together. So keep that in mind. And I will disclaim it whenever I jump back and forth between physical facts and some guesswork. Okay, let's get into it. Now, our story begins roughly an hour or so after the Titanic struck the iceberg. By this point in time, the evacuation of the Titanic was well underway, and the first lifeboat to leave the Titanic, lifeboat number 7, was being lowered away over the ship's starboard side. Now, over on the port side of the Titanic, Second Officer Charles Lightoller was leading the evacuation over here. And it was around this time that he gave an order to a crew member, a man by the name Albert Nichols, I believe. Can't be 100% certain on that, but I believe it was Albert. Anyway, he told Albert to go down below deck and open up some of the Titanic's gangway doors on the port side. Now, for those of you that don't know, gangway doors are giant steel doors located on a ship's hull, and they open and close these doors to allow passengers to board and exit a ship when it's in port. Now, the reason why Lightoller wanted these doors to be opened was because he wanted to lower the lifeboats over the port side of the ship, and then once they got down closer to the waterline and close to these gangway doors, he was going to allow passengers to board the boats through these doors. He was thinking more about third-class passengers when he gave this order. Now, when Lightoller gave Albert this order, he told him to collect as many men as he thought he would need for this task and to go and open those doors. And Albert quickly left, and Lightoller never saw the man again. Now, this is why the story gets a little confusing, because besides the testimony of Lightoller, there is no other official accounts as to what exactly happened next. Only evidence at the wreck and circumstantial evidence. Now, Lightoller would later testify that he wasn't specific on which gangway doors he wanted Albert to open, but at the time he was thinking about the E-deck gangway doors. Now, for your information, there were several gangway doors located along the Titanic's port side. The E-deck gangway door was located right around here at the aft part of the forward well deck, okay? Now, there's also the D-deck gangway door, which is located right around here in between the Titanic's first and second funnel. There are some other gangway doors further aft, but it's unlikely Lightoller would have been thinking about these. Now, at the time, Lightoller did say that even though he wasn't specific with Albert, he was thinking about the E-deck gangway door. But here's the problem. By the time that Lightoller would have given this order, the E-deck gangway door, it would have been very close to the waterline, if not already submerged. So it's very unlikely that Albert and the crew that he took with him, however many that may be, would have tried to open this door. Now, I did use a Titanic ROV game that basically lets you explore the wreck of the Titanic, and the thing about this game is the model of the wreck you explore in the game, well, it was made by using like 30 or so thousand photos of the real Titanic wreck. So by exploring the ship in this game, you can get a pretty good idea of what the actual wreck looks like. And I did go and check the E-deck gangway door within the game, and as far as I could tell, it's closed. So yeah, I think it's safe to assume that this door was never opened. However, the same can't be said for the D-deck gangway door. If you go and check out this area within the game, well, this door is wide open. And there is other like official photos of this area taken at the wreck that showed this door was wide open. So yes, something happened at the D-deck gangway door. But what happened exactly? Well, let's talk about it. So now we're getting to the event that may have accelerated the sinking of the Titanic. Now, we don't know the exact time the crew would have arrived at the D-deck gangway door, but if I had to guess, I would say it happened at some point after 1 a.m. The reason I'm making this assumption is because of lifeboat number 6. Lifeboat number 6 was lowered over the Titanic's side on the port side of the ship around this time. And the thing is, the path that lifeboat number 6 would have taken, this is lifeboat number 6 right here that I'm pointing at, well, it would have taken the boat right along down the Titanic's hull, and it would have passed right beside the D-deck gangway door right there before it reached the waterline. And when this lifeboat did this, not a single survivor from this lifeboat said anything about this door being opened. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal to have an open door on a sinking ship. And you would assume that somebody on the boat would have mentioned it if they saw it. So based on this, we can conclude that the door was most likely not open yet during this time. So if I had to guess, I would say that the D-deck door was opened up at some point between 1:15 and 1:20 a.m. But there's a problem with this. You see, by this point in the sinking, water would have been extremely close to reaching the area where the D-deck gangway door was located, and any crew member who opened up this door would have clearly seen the water rapidly approaching. So why would you leave the door open if you saw this? If I was one of those crew members, I would shut and lock the door immediately. Well, there's 3 possibilities. The first possibility is the crew never opened up the D-deck gangway door at all. And the reason why it's open on the wreck today is due to the fact that the door could have been blown open when the Titanic slammed into the bottom of the ocean. I think this is unlikely due to the fact that there are 2 gangway doors located in that area, and one of the doors is still securely shut. So why would one of the doors be blown open if the other one wasn't? That's my logic there. The second possibility is that the crew opened up the gangway door, but they just didn't pay that much attention to where the water was. They opened the door, secured it, and then left the area. Okay, that seems a little hard for me to believe, but yes, it's possible. The third possibility is that the crew opened up the gangway door, saw the water rapidly approaching, and then they were in a hurry to shut and secure the door, and they did so improperly, and the door was never properly closed. So when the water reached the area where the gangway door was, it began to flood in, and then the act of flooding could have opened up the door even more, and yeah, this area began to flood rapidly when this door dipped beneath the surface. Honestly, if I had to guess, I would say option 3 is the most likely. But yeah, I'm curious as to what you all think. Now, just to give you guys a little bit more context here, okay? If the D-deck gangway door was indeed opened and left open during the sinking, well, when this area slipped beneath the ocean's surface, the opening that it made in the Titanic's hull, well, this opening was bigger than all of the iceberg damage combined, confined to a single area on the ship. So what I mean by that is, when the Titanic struck the iceberg, it basically just made a bunch of small punctures along the hull, okay, over a very, very large area, from the front of the ship to just after the first funnel. Well, the opening by the D-deck gangway door, it was one giant hole within the Titanic's hull that was bigger than all of the iceberg damage combined if it was all one giant opening in the ship. Yeah, that's a pretty big new opening to have in a ship's hull during a sinking. And when the water finally reached the D-deck gangway door at roughly 1:30 a.m., well, the amount of water that it would have let into the ship, if left open, would have been absolutely astronomical, and it would have accelerated the sinking of the Titanic, despite the actions of all the other crew members on board trying desperately to keep her afloat. Now, you're probably wondering if there is any direct evidence that occurred during the sinking of Titanic, not just the evidence we see today at the wreck, that could suggest that the D-deck gangway door was open during the sinking. Well, there is one pretty big piece of circumstantial evidence that suggests this. You see, before the Titanic struck the iceberg, the ship had a slight list to port, and this was due to a bunch of coal that the crew had shifted around inside the ship during the maiden voyage to put out a coal fire. For those of you that don't know, there was a small coal fire burning in the Titanic's starboard side coal bunker in boiler room number 6. And to put this coal out, they had to move the coal from the coal bunker where it was burning, douse the fire, and then they put it into the port side coal bunker. And by doing this, it caused the Titanic to have a very, very slight list to port during the maiden voyage. Now, after the Titanic struck the iceberg, the water came in on the ship's starboard side, the opposite side of where the coal that had been shifted around was located. And when this happened, it caused the Titanic's port list to even out, and then the Titanic slowly began to list to starboard, the area where the water was coming in. Now, as the sinking continued to play out, the Titanic's starboard list slowly began to even out, and the ship returned to more or less an even keel. However, around 1:30 a.m., about the time that the D-deck gangway door would have went underwater, well, at this time, the Titanic began to develop a very sharp list to port again. And if you ask me, I think this is due to all of the water that began to rapidly flood inside of the ship after the D-deck gangway door went under. It makes sense. So, the Titanic's physical behavior during the sinking does match what would have happened when the D-deck gangway door went under, even though we don't have any survivor testimony to back this up. So yeah, when you take into account, number 1, the physical evidence at the wreck site, number 2, the testimony of Second Officer Charles Lightoller, and number 3, the fact that the Titanic began to develop this sharp list to port around the time that the D-deck gangway door would have went underwater, I think it's pretty safe to conclude that the door was in fact open during the sinking. Now, the question has to be asked, how much time would the Titanic have lost due to the fact that this door was in fact open? Well, it's impossible to say for certain, but if I had to guess, I'd say it would be somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes. But there is something else you need to know about this. You see, the rate that this open door would have accelerated the sinking of the Titanic has to do with where the water actually was within the Titanic at the time that the door would have began to slip beneath the surface. You see, if the water inside of the Titanic was basically all the way up to the waterline level where the door physically was, and there was no more dry spaces within the ship, so the waterline outside the ship matched the flood levels inside the ship, then the water pressure would have been about the same between both the outside and the inside, so this really wouldn't have accelerated the flooding all that much at all. However, I don't think this was the case. Around the time that the D-deck gangway door would have began to slip beneath the surface, I'm fairly certain the water was at the Titanic's E-deck level. It wasn't at the D-deck level yet, or if it was just starting to flood that area. So, because the water hadn't really reached the D-deck level yet, when the gangway door went underwater, that area began to rapidly flood, and where it was on the port side of the Titanic, the water began to concentrate on the port side of the ship, and then the port list began to develop. Oh yeah, that's right. I can't believe I didn't think of that. If the water level on the inside of the ship matched the water level on the outside, and there were no more dry spaces within the ship, well, you would think that the Titanic wouldn't develop a port list at all. You know, because the water inside the ship, it would have evenly flooded out, the gangway door would have made little to no impact, and the Titanic would have continued to sink down perfectly level like it had been. It wouldn't develop that port list. Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah, the water wasn't on the D-deck level yet. I just reached that conclusion. So yeah, in conclusion, I think it's pretty safe to assume that the D-deck gangway door, hey, look at it flooding right there, actually. That's it flooding. But yeah, I think it's pretty safe to assume that the D-deck gangway door was in fact open during the sinking. Now, in case you're wondering about Lightoller, you know, like, why would Lightoller allow this to happen? Why did he not really seem to care about the gangway door during the sinking, with the exception of giving these crewmen the order to go and open the doors? Because, oh yeah, I never mentioned that. Lightoller really did nothing with the whole gangway door thing. You know, after Albert left, Lightoller took no action with the gangway door. Why is this? Well, honestly, I think he just completely forgot about it. The fact that he never saw Albert or any of those crew members again, and all of them did perish in the sinking, by the way, I think with everything going on, Lightoller simply forgot about the gangway doors. And he did later testify that he honestly didn't know for certain that the Titanic was sinking at the time that he ordered those doors open, because he said that if he did, he would know for a fact that those would cause the ship to sink faster, and he never would have done it. So yeah, I think Lightoller just simply forgot. This was just a human error that was made, you know, at the time when he gave the order. He gave it with good intentions, but yeah, it went on to accelerate the sinking. But yeah, Lightoller didn't know. He didn't know what happened with the gangway door. The only thing he knew was that he gave that crewman that order. So yeah, that's what happened with that. But anyway, guys, you guys now know the story of the D-deck gangway door and why it is one of the most heavily debated topics with the Titanic. Because we do have physical evidence at the wreck, circumstantial evidence during the sinking, one man's testimony, and from that, we're trying to piece together an event that most likely, in my opinion, did accelerate the sinking of the Titanic. But as I've also stated, there's no way we can know for certain what exactly happened. But anyway, guys, I'm curious to know your all's thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And if you like this video, please be sure to leave it a like. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys so much. It really helps out a lot. And I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Special thanks to my captain level Patreon supporter, Tammy Lee. Thank you so much for all the support.